Hey, good morning everybody. Dr. Heldman here, Ancient Texts Revealed. In this video, which I think is going to wind up being at least two videos, I want to introduce you to a little known group of people that were around in the early Bible days, like we're talking Bronze Age and maybe even a little bit before. They're called the Hurrians. They're very interesting. Let's get started. You know, there were a lot of people living in the area where the Hebrews and the Israelites were at. They're all around that area of the Levant and up into Mesopotamia, even further north. And one of those groups is the Hurrians. And a lot of the things that these people had in common was idol worship. They were into worshiping various gods. The Hurrians were exactly the same way. And so we need to understand who they were and why they were. And they're not like other peoples, so that's one of the interesting things about them. Now, they were, some anthropologists think that the Hurrians migrated from the Caucasus Mountains into Mesopotamia. I don't have a good feel for the geography of that area, so I had to do a lot of looking up and researching maps and things like that. You might have a better feel for it than I do, but I wanted to show you where this is at. Hang on to this notion of the Caucasus Mountains. And so this is the Kura Araxes culture. This was roughly 3,400 to 2000 BC, so this would have been roughly around the time of even late Noah into after the flood. They were centered in the Caucasus and the Armenian highlands. These are pictured to the right here. You can see there's the Caucasus Mountains and the Armenian highlands here, and they are frequently associated with what is called the Hurrian presence. So archaeology, anthropology does support this. Hurrian names begin to appear in the Mesopotamian records around 2300 BC, including in Akkadian texts and inscriptions from Urkesh, which was a Hurrian city-state. So you need to be aware of the name Urkesh. Now, they had a gradual southward expansion. So they expanded from the Caucasus, the Armenian highlands here, into northern Mesopotamia. That's where Urgesh, two of their cities, Urkesh and Nagar, were created, and then into the Pantheon beyond like Syria and other parts of the Levant. So they were really a roaming people. They roamed for quite a good distance, considering how late that was, how long ago that was. This is a pretty good map that I found. I just wanted to show you where the Caucasus Mountains were at. As you can see on the screen, there are two. There's the Greater Caucasus Mountains and the Lesser Caucasus Mountains. I think that the Hurrians came out of the Lesser Caucasus Mountains, and I drew some arrows to roughly give you a feel for where everything's at. So up to the north, this is Russia, up here. There's Georgia, just below Russia, Azerbaijan on the right-hand side, Turkey on the left-hand side. This is where the Armenian plateau is at, and over on the right, this would be where Armenia is at. Iran's to the southeast, and then there's this area called Van and Lake Van, and I put that there so that if you're looking at maps to figure out where everything's at, that Lake Van will be a good geographic highlight for you to figure out where you're at. As you're going through and you're looking at different maps, you're trying to figure out the lay of the land where all this happened. You can get really confused, so it's good to have these little physical landmarks to look for, like Lake Van and things like that. Now, here's another picture of Mesopotamia. I've showed you this picture before. This isn't a super good one, but the thing that it does do for you is it helps you get a feel for where you're at. So if you're looking at the inset, this is the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers. There they are there. And we are roughly in Iraq here. This is roughly Iraq. And then to the left over here, you can see that Israel is over here in this little tiny area here. This is Egypt over here. Turkey's to the north over here. So you have a feel where when we say the word Mesopotamia, we know roughly where we're talking about. And of course, Babylon is still It's not a city anymore, but it's still an area in Iraq, so we know about that. Now here's a better map, I think, and I was scrounging around looking for maps, trying to find maps that will help you get a feel for where we're at here. So there's a couple of landmarks to look for here, like Mari, Ashur, Nineveh. You can see where we're at. Here's the Euphrates. Here's the Tigris River. This is Baghdad in Iraq. There's Babylon. To the southwest here, this is Iraq. To the west even yet, there's Jordan, Israel. To the northwest, there's Syria. And way up north, there's Turkey. So what we're saying is that the Hurrians migrated somewhere up in here and came down, and they went even as far as into Syria and along in the Levant here. This would be called the Levant. Now this is a more modern map, but I think it does give you a good layout as to the geography of where these people were at. They had two cities. There are others, of course, but the two cities that we're really interested in are Urkesh and Nagar. Urkesh is the big guy. That's where we're going to concentrate a lot of our efforts now, talking about where things are at. And these are located in the Taurus foothills. So these are the Taurus foothills here, and that is the lowlands of northeastern Syria right over here. Now another slide that I thought was interesting, the Kurds, the Kurdistans, live in the northwest part of Iraq. They abut Syria, they abut Turkey. The Hurrians originated as a non-Semitic people, likely from the Armenian highlands. We've seen pictures of that. And if you're thinking modern-day Kurdistan, Kurdistan evolved. So if you're looking at maps of Kurdistan, the area is going to change a little bit depending upon the year of the map that you're looking at. This map came from 1975. And so Kurdistan roughly, very, very roughly, equates to the Armenian highlands. So today what would be modern Kurdistan, where the Kurds are living, would be where the Hurrians came from. And I'm not saying that the Hurrians are Kurds. I'm just saying that we can equate the rough geographic area of where the Kurds were at with where the Hurrians were at. Now, what do we mean by non-Semitic people? The Hurrians were non-Semitic. Well, the term non-Semitic refers to peoples or languages that do not belong to the Semitic language family. Duh, I'm sure you figured that out. When we say non-Semitic, we are saying that their language, their cultural linguistic heritage falls outside of the Semitic group, and I'll show you who that group is here in a minute. The Hurrians are classified as non-Semitic people because their language, Hurrian, is not related to Semitic languages. It does not belong to the Afro-Asiatic language family as well. So it's kind of by itself. And so it's called a language isolate. So they were kind of off into their own little thing. It might be grouped with what's called Urartian in the Hurro-Urartian family, and it has no confirmed relation to Indo-European or Semitic languages. So to say that it was a language isolate means that these people spoke Hurrian, nobody else in the area spoke it, and they did not adopt other people's languages. That doesn't mean that a Hurrian person might not have learned another language. It just means that the language they spoke was common to them. Culturally, the Hurrians lived among and interacted with the Semitic peoples like the Akkadians, the Amorites. The Hittites wrote a lot about them, but their ethnic and linguistic identity was distinct. So be aware of that. Now, the non-Semitic peoples are quite a few. So the term non-Semitic refers to peoples or languages that do not belong to the Semitic language family. When we say non-Semitic, we're saying their language and cultural linguistic heritage falls outside of the Semitic group. Well, what was the Semitic group? The Semitic languages are a branch of larger Afro-Asiatic language family. They include Akkadian, which would have taken in Babylon and Assyria, Hebrew, of course, Aramaic, Phoenician, Arabic, and on the left hand I've got pictured there Hagar and her son Ishmael. You might remember the story. She was kicked out into the desert, and they became a massive and important people. And this is a super good painting from 1819 of that story. And then Amharic, which is the Ethiopian language, Ugaritic, and so forth. So when you're thinking about Semitic peoples, you're thinking about this basic language set. There are others, but the Hurrians were not, they did not have a Semitic language. Now the Hurrians, this is very interesting, they performed rituals, and they worshipped a pantheon of gods. They were huge idol worshippers, just like the majority of people that were living in and around this area. The Hurrians had a well-defined funerary. What does that mean? It means funeral and afterlife beliefs. So they were very, very focused on the afterlife, and they celebrated the kispum celebration. They were into ancestor veneration. Hurrian texts, especially from those from Ugarit and Hattusa, where the Hurrian myths were preserved by the Hittites. The Hittites did a lot of preserving of the Hurrian dialogue, the documents, the methods, the way the peoples acted, things like that. They reflect a belief in the underworld and chthonic, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, chthonic deities. A chthonic or chthonic deity is an underworld deity. They live in hell. And they had several gods. Alani, who was the queen of the underworld. She was associated with Ereshkigal in the Akkadian mythology, and she's pictured here to the right. You can see this isn't very easy to see, but you can see a stone relief here of Alani. There was another god called Ugur. He was a warrior god associated with death and the netherworld. They were all about this netherworld idea. And the Nergal, who imported and shared death deity, often found in the Hurrian Hittite syncretism. Now, syncretism means we agree, we get along, we understand each other. So the Hurrians and the Hittites were pretty close. The language might have been a little bit different, but the Hittites did document what the Hurrians were up to. This is a robust underworld mythology, and it's tied to what is called ritual performance, and we need to be aware of what that was. So in the ritual of the Hurrians, they had a thing called an Abi. Now, the way to think about this is if you're a modern-day witch, I hope you're not, or a wizard, what would happen is you would take, like chalk or salt and proscribe a circle, and then you would, that circle is what you stayed in when you were going to do your rituals. The Hurrians took that a lot further. They took a 25-foot, it's roughly 25 foot across in diameter circle. They dug down 26.5 feet. There is some evidence from archaeology that they actually dug down to 40 feet, so they were really trying to get down into the netherworld. I don't think that they were actually trying to dig to the netherworld, but they were trying to get close to it. They put a staircase in here so the priests or kings or queens, whatever, could descend down into the staircase. And the Abi was where they performed their rituals. So this is an actual picture of it, and I will put the links out here so you can go take a look at a lot of the archaeological research that's been done with the Hurrian Abi. It's very interesting. It's a stone structure. It's sunk deeply into the ground. It's accessed through a narrow stairwell. It allows the king, queen, or priest to descend. Archaeologists believed it was used from 2400 until 1300 BC, so this is a long period of time that they used these things, but potentially much earlier. They couldn't even go back to 4000 BC. At some juncture, it was a round, just like a well. It was a 26-foot wide by 40-foot deep well, or 26. When it's been dug down to 26 feet now, 25 feet wide, 26.5 feet deep, potentially going to 40 feet deep. At some juncture, the walls were removed and they excavated a square like you see here, and then they had a little keyhole type thing here, and that may have been for, who knows, for the sun coming around on a solstice, who knows. And it gave the structure a total length of about 24.5 feet. So from here to here would have been 24.5 feet. The rituals in the Abi were performed at sunset or at night inside a magic circle dug into the dirt of the pit with a hoe or a shovel, or traced with a pin, knife, or dagger. So they started out making this big circle, a perfect concentric circle, or as perfect as you can get with a hoe or a shovel, and then they began to dig down. This is remarkably similar to modern occult rituals in which magicians use what's called a magic circle. They're sometimes drawn with salt or chalk, and the idea here is that the wizard or witch is protecting themselves from the spirit that is being summoned. And so this may have been the same sort of idea here. Maybe modern-day witchcraft borrowed this idea from the Hurrians. It's hard to say. The ritual pits were to allow primeval gods or former gods to rise from the netherworld, implying that at some point they had a larger god status, if that's a thing, and then they wound up in the netherworld. And so the idea was to allow them to rise from the netherworld, drawn to sacrifices, and to hear their pleas. Now, the nature of the rituals performed in the Abi explains several of its salient features. The darkness is suited for a setting that aims to put humans in touch with the netherworld. Now, I want you to know that I recommend a book for you. There's a guy named Derek Gilbert. He and his wife write quite a few books like this. And so part of where I'm getting this Hurrian information, besides the web and other sources, is out of his book. Let me show it to you. It is called The Gates of Hell by Derek Gilbert. And I recommend this book. Derek's a good writer. He's a good researcher. They're very thorough. His wife helps him write these books. She's written several of the chapters in this book. They're good writers. They do a cogent and a coherent story. And it's not way over the top like when you read some, journals, scientific journals or archaeological journals. They get really, really in-depth, and you get lost. You're like, oh, I don't know what all these words mean, and there's all these references. I've got to backpedal and go look at the references. A book like this with Derek Gilbert, The Gates of Hell, is much more approachable for the average reader. And so I would recommend that book to you. I think it's a pretty good book. I know Derek. I've met him in prophecy conferences. He doesn't know me from Adam. We don't personally know each other. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I have met him at prophecy conferences. He's a good guy. His wife's a great lady. They're on Skywatch TV all the time. He has a show that he runs every night, essentially the news. He summarizes fairly important news items, and it's called 5 in 10. And so I like Derek Gilbert a great deal. He's a straight shooter, and his research is solid. That's why he shows up here when I'm quoting him. Also, there's this urkesh.org. There are a couple of other sites. This picture came from urkesh.org, and what they're doing is they're showing you here, there's two people down in the pit here, how far down that would be, how it's pretty far down there, and this guy's shining a light on them. All of the rituals were done at night. I don't know about you. I'm not sure I want to go into a 26-foot deep hole in the ground at night to call up a netherworld spirit. I think that would be pretty weird or creepy, maybe. I don't know. Now it goes further. So there's a thing called the Abi Watercourse. Now what was this? Well, this is a pool, and it's a pool that is in the dark. And so the idea is it was created to look as though it was a riverbank, and scholars believe that the pool had been created for Hurrian sacred rituals. What's interesting about this is that this pool has an ideogram associated with it. An ideogram is a pictorial element of writing. It's similar, I guess, to hieroglyphics. And in this case, the ideogram is KASKAL.KUR, KASKAL.KUR. This term has only been found in 9 Hittite texts, one of which is a treaty that was been dated back to 1280 BC between the Hittite king Muwatalli II. He's pictured right. So here in this stone relief right there, this is Muwatalli II. And then Alexandru of Wilusa. Some scholars believe that this Alexandru guy was Alexander of Troy, although others claim that he was Paris, the young man that started the Trojan War because he stole Helen away from her husband, King Menelaus of Sparta. So either way, there's this theory that there was a treaty between this Hittite king and this guy here, this Alaksandu. And inside that treaty was mentioned this pool called KASKAL.KUR. And so I wanted you to know about that. And I did take this out of the Gilbert book. Now here, this is just a rendering of what the pool might have looked like. The term Kaskal is interpreted as meaning path or road, while Kur means underworld. So when you hear this Kaskal.KUR, what you should be thinking in your mind is, okay, these guys were in a ritual of some kind. I imagine that the pool was shallow. I don't know for sure. And maybe they even went into the pool and tried to go to the other side to get to the netherworld. But the idea is that they're trying to summon up spirits from the netherworld to come assist them. And it was a reference to a path to the underworld or an underground path. So the Hurrians were kind of a dark people. I don't know much more than that. I can tell you that when archaeologists went down into the Abi, they did find potsherds and stuff at the very bottom, which is how they knew that they were close to the bottom. They do believe that it's a little bit deeper, but they did find potsherds and archaeological evidence inside this Abi. Now, this is a good map of where they were. Here is Urkesh. Nagar's a little bit below here. You can see that this was the Hurrian kingdom here. And then we go down into, right here, Mesopotamia, Akkad, and so forth. There's that little geographic note here, Mari. That's something that you could look for that would help you get your bearing if you're looking at various maps. These are the Semitic nomads. The Bedouins are over here. This is Egypt right over here. This is the Red Sea right here. This is Israel coming up through here right here. Turkey's up to the north. And then, of course, we have Jordan. We have Libya. We have Saudi Arabia, and so forth. These are all down to the south there. So this is a really good map. So the Abi was an underground portal to communicate with spirits in the netherworld. The archaeological discoveries at Urkesh connect the Hurrian religious rituals performed in western Syria. So here's Syria over here, western Syria over here, and central Turkey up in here, as late as 1200 BC. The middle of period falls in the exact middle period of the Judges of Israel, which I find to be fascinating, with a monumental religious center constructed in northeast Syria more than 2,000 years earlier, and of course the people who built the temple who migrated there from the Ararat plain. So all of this is connected together. As you go further north and you go into the region of Turkey, you're going to run into Mount Ararat, and there's an upper and a lower, and these people came roughly from that area and then began to migrate to the south, and they were called the Hurrians. Their whole thing was ancestor veneration, and they especially had rituals that called forth the gods of the underworld. Now, why is all of this relevant? Well, because today there are occult practices that were used by the Hurrians in the city of Urkesh more than 5,000 years ago, and they're still prevalent. There are still people doing these things. Anyone familiar with the story of Genesis 6, the real story, not the Sethite theory, fallen watcher angels, them mating with human women, the birth of the Nephilim giants, God's subsequent judgment of the watchers, condemning them to the bottomless pit, which Jesus called Tartaros, that should resonate with what's happening here. So this is the same old story, and people are playing that out in the modern world today. It's the same idea. Many of the occult rituals then and now involved contacting spirits in the netherworld, often on the far side of a body of water. Okay, now as I said, this is going to be video number 1. There's more meat to this story, so I'm going to want to dive in. I just wanted to give you a background when we say the word Hurrians, who we're talking about. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, could I persuade you to subscribe to this channel? I'm trying to grow it. There's the YouTube link there, at Dr. Heldman ATR. That stands for Ancient Text Revealed. Like this video, share it with your friends, And please feel free to comment on it. I get a lot of great comments from you guys. So thank you for listening, and I hope you have a blessed and happy day. May God bless you. I'll talk to you on the next video.